Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome to our webinar again. It's electric vehicles. Are they here to stay and are they accessible? That's the big question. Next slide. Electric vehicles are starting to show up as part of, our mainstream of cars. From our big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, and other OEMs. And so we want to really take a dive into this to see how they're accessible. We had an earlier webinar earlier in August where we talked about autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles because they are also electric. And so that webinar, if you want to look back at that for reference, is at our pva.org website. Today's webinar, we have the webinar process, which is this webinar will be recorded and available for viewing at pva.org, as all our webinars are. It's also closed captioning, so you can click the CC button on your Zoom, and that way, if you need that, you will be able to have that service. And then if you have questions, please type in the Q&A chat box, and those questions will be answered at the Q&A time at the end of the program. Next slide. So our agenda today is introductions. We have presentations. Our presentations today are talking about the auto loan grant, which is legislation before Congress right now. And then we have presenters from two different organizations that do modifications to vehicles that like our minivans or other vehicles that people with disabilities drive. And we want to know how they are doing in their modifications when it comes to electric vehicles. So presentations, and then we'll have roundtable discussion with the presenters, which I will monitor. And then we've got questions from webinar participants, which are you guys, which Heather will monitor at the end of the webinar. Okay, next slide. So introductions. As I said, I'm Lee Page. I'm the Senior Associate Director for PVA here in our national office. Heather, as you know, is the Associate Executive Director for Government Relations, and she'll be talking about the auto grant. We have Kevin Frayne, who is the Director of Advanced Mobility Solutions at Braun Ability. Again, that's a modification company. And then we've got Philip Angelachio, who's the Chief Operation Officer at Vantage Mobility International, or VMI. And then Dale Deskins, who is the Director of Production at Vantage Mobility International, also, or VMI, another modification company. Next slide. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather, and she can talk about the auto grant.
Well, thanks, Lee, and good afternoon, everyone. So we did want to just briefly discuss the automobile allowance grant that's available through the Department of Veterans Affairs for veterans with certain service-connected disabilities, and also some of our legislative efforts to try to make improvements to the program in terms of the number of grants that are available. This grant has been around for a number of decades. It's helped many veterans be able to have access to the transportation to allow them to live and work and be a part of their communities. The auto grant, as of now, you can only get one of these grants in your lifetime. So once you get your one grant to purchase an automobile, that is the only one that a veteran receives. And it's right now in the 20,000 area range. It just increased recently with the being indexed for cost of inflation. And unfortunately, it's still a very much a financial hardship for many disabled veterans to be able to replace their vehicle, even with their initial grant, which is only about half it only usually will purchase about half the cost of an adapted vehicle, which can run up to, $40,000, $60,000, depending on the type of vehicle you need to access for your disability to be modified. And so even when you have your first grant, it doesn't buy the entire vehicle. And then that's the only grant that you will receive to be able to make to be able to access that transportation. VA will continue to provide modification assistance, but in terms of being able to purchase a vehicle, you get the one opportunity. So we've been working on legislation in Congress that would make changes to a number of times that you're able to get a grant. And in September, we saw the House pass some legislation that's HR 3304. It's now known as the Auto for Veterans Act, and it would authorize the VA to provide an eligible veteran with an additional automobile allowance grant if it's been 25 years since the date you received your first grant. And then starting 10 years after the bill is signed, that time frame would decrease from 25 years to 10 years, so that eligible veterans would be able to receive an additional grant if 10 years had passed since the first grant. The reason that it's in the language that way is because of the need to pay for the legislation and to be able to meet the offset requirements that have been identified to try to get this legislation over the finish line. So that's why it starts at 25 years and then goes to 10 years. And then the bill would also change the definition of medical services to include certain vehicle modifications, like getting in and out of the vehicle, that are offered through the VA's Automobile Adaptive Equipment Program. And I mentioned that would really help our non-service connected veterans. Right now, if you're a service connected veteran, you're able to receive automobile adaptive equipment assistance throughout your life. And this would ensure that service connected veterans have more protections in terms of being able to at least receive assistance getting in and out of their vehicle. So the House, as I mentioned, did pass the legislation in late September, and we then had October, all of October, where Congress was out in the states and districts running for re-election, and they're back now, actually back this week. And we're really hoping that we can get the Senate to pass this legislation so that this could become law by the end of the year. The bill has been a bipartisan effort in both the House and Senate, and we have identified the funding needed to pay for the bill. So it's got a lot working for it, but unfortunately the timeline, the time available in the rest of this Congress is quickly drawing to a close. So we would ask that you take the time to contact your senators and urge them to pass the bill this year. You can see that we do have a link to a campaign on the site. We will share the slides with all who registered, and they will be available on our website. But if you want to access it now, you can go to pva.org and you'll find links to all of our legislative priorities and how to take action with those. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Lee.
Thanks, Heather. That's a lot of good information. Let's go ahead and turn it over to Dale, who is at VMI. Okay, Dale.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Lee said, I'm Dale Deskins. I'm the Director of Production at VMI. Next slide. I just want to give you, I'll do some introductions of the individuals that are on the webinar. Also, just kind of give you a broad overview of what VMI is about, and then we'll pass it over to Braun. So the three core pillars that we have that we try to focus on for our wheelchair accessible vans is durability, functionality, and affordability. Next slide. And the individuals that are on the call right now, which is Earl Henry, he's our veteran support manager. He helps individuals with the process of getting the benefits that they just mentioned. Philip Angelecchio, he's our chief operating officer, and myself. Next slide. So we've VMI's been converting vans for just over 35 years. We've got locations in Phoenix, Atlanta, and Detroit. Phoenix is our primary hub for wheelchair minivan modification. It's veteran led. So our CEO is an Army veteran. Our COO, Philip, is a Marine Corps veteran, and myself, I'm an Air Force veteran of 23 years. And we have over 300 authorized dealers nationwide, and we're American owned and operated as well. Next slide. One of the things for the durability and reliability that we kind of focus on is we run it through over 10,000 cycles to make sure that the product is reliable, and that, you know, we don't have any failures out in the field. We use OEM components from the manufacturers wherever possible. And we also added some extra additional protection from against rust. We use, for example, Gavanil steel versus cold roll to kind of mitigate rust, and includes a 7-year warranty. So again, it's all about the durability of it. We also, the vehicles that we convert, the new ones, they maintain the original manufacturer's warranty, which is good. So if you have an issue with the drivetrain, et cetera, that you can still take it to your dealer, and they will honor it. VMI conversion warranty also covers a 3-year, 35,000 mile on the conversion itself. So that way we ensure that you can drive knowing that your vehicle is going to be protected. Next slide. Functionality is another important feature that we focus on. Again, we try to retain any OEM features that are possible. Obviously, with this is a pretty extensive conversion, so we try to respect the original design as much as possible, while trying to maintain the maximum interior space, because space gets pretty tight for our users. So we try to keep that in our mind, but in the back of our mind on our designs. And we also have alerts that, you know, as you park in a handicap spot, sometimes people maybe park a little close, and makes it harder for you to use your product. So we have an audible alert that lets them know, really in a polite voice, to let them know that what they're doing is going to maybe cause a problem for our users. And so it lets them know that, you know, that they need to maybe move their car or their obstacle that they put in the way. We also include stuff like ramp lighting. VMI has a Toyota hybrid that also has all-wheel drive capability. And right now that is the only all-wheel drive capable platform, which makes it nice when you have austere conditions like snow and ice. And also backup batteries for the ramp operation, just in case something does arise and you have an emergency, it's there to help you out. Next slide. Affordability is another one that we do all this stuff, and we have to keep in the back of mind the cost. And so we try to drive out any additional costs anywhere we can to make this more affordable. We know that this isn't a luxury item, and, you know, cost is very, very sensitive to our customers, and we are trying everything we can to keep those down. And then we just have a little bit of data down here below that, you know, talks about an electrical vehicle. The average price is $75,000. And, you know, this, they also have, you know, stuff like the range. When it's an all electric vehicle, the range is, you know, on average about 217 miles versus, you know, the Toyota Sienna, like I mentioned, was which is a hybrid. You can get 600 plus miles out of it because it uses a combination of gas and electricity. And another nice feature about it is it's not a plug-in, so you don't have to come home and plug your car in or have to worry about that. It charges the battery using the gas engine and regenerative power as well. So as you brake and stuff like that. So there are some limited vehicle options today, but some, you know, they're still in the early stages of the EV process. So the EV market's really early on, so that we kind of foresee the EV technology maturing over the next few years, but it's going to be a little bit down the road. But And also you have to worry about with the charging infrastructure, they're making some headway, but there's still a long way to go for charging stations, et cetera, for strictly electric vehicles. And this is maybe right now where the hybrid, where it's a gas and electric combination might be best suitable for our customers. So that way it's not as labor intensive to try to charge or stressful when you have to look for a charging station, which they're limited. So next slide. And that's all I have. I'm going to pass it on to Brown Ability.
All right. Thanks, Dale. We appreciate that. And Kevin, up to you.
Thanks, Lee. Well, you guys can see my long title there. I'm the Director of Advanced Mobility Solutions at Brown Ability. I've been here just coming up 4 years, and that was after 30 years of spending a career at General Motors. Engineer, product manager, marketing manager, consumer research, strategy development. So I was excited to kind of do the next stage of my career and come and do something that I like to say be more impactful with a purpose. My job here is to basically find opportunities and partners in the areas of advanced technology, which certainly covers things such as electric, autonomous, connectivity. We're looking at both consumer and personal use and commercial use. And we're basically going down a path here to make sure we're ready when the right vehicles are there for accessible EVs. We want to be a part of that change and lead the change over to electric. Next slide, please. So here's a little blast from the past for those of you who have lived through the variety of waves that existed over the years. The key thing to take away from this is, conversions have very much followed what happens in mainstream automotive. When there's a new paradigm shift or new body style there that lends itself very well to accessibility, us and our competitors are on it and looking to find the best opportunity for wheelchair users and caregivers. You can see the gamut here. So we start with a 1966 Willys Jeep, which was Ralph Braun's first vehicle he made for his own travel. And the company was born about 50 years ago, a little over 50 years ago, based out of other people wanting the same opportunity. And you can see when full-size vans were popular with lifts, then pop tops came into existence to get that extra height required for wheelchair users who have a higher seating height. You can see the movement then into mid-size vans that existed back in the 90s and 2000s, and then one of the first Entravans there. When minivans came around, they proved to be one of the best vehicles to convert due to their efficient use of space, their tall interior height. What I want to emphasize here is none of these things happened overnight. It wasn't one vehicle that came out and everything changed immediately and everything else was gone. This is a long runway. We've been on for probably the last 10 years, and we see it happening here for quite a few other years. So as the industry, automotive and conversion and accessibility evolves, it's going to be gradual here. So as we find the right vehicles to do the first accessible ways, we'll do that. And you'll still have internal combustion for quite a few years as that happens. Okay, next one, please. I wanted to talk briefly about some of the things that I've been leading here at Brown Ability that relate directly to getting ready for electric vehicles. So starting back almost 4 years ago, we were working with the French manufacturer Navia on an electric autonomous shuttle, and we worked with them to put an accessible ramp in their vehicle. And as Dale mentioned, the Sienna Hybrid is out right now from both of our companies. And that's allowed us to get expertise in both high voltage systems, battery relocation, and all of that information, technological know-how is going to lend itself when full EVs are here. You can also see our team here where we work with Purdue on the Department of Transportation Inclusive Design Contest. For that specifically, we developed an extra thin ramp, which is just under 2 inches thick. So we were able to package that very tightly below the floor and above the batteries of that vehicle. And I was very proud of working with Purdue on that, as well as some wheelchair securement solutions that Purdue actually won the $1 million prize, first place on You can see a little call out there. We did a special build. We did some very quick engineering to serve May Mobility on their autonomous vehicle development. So it's working with these high-tech companies with a hybrid vehicle, allowing this autonomous manufacturer, again, to provide accessibility. And they have the first 3 vehicles deployed right now in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. You can see for our 50th anniversary, we rebuilt a 1966 Jeep like Ralph first built. This one here has a full electric chassis we put under it. It has our extra thin ramp, and you see we have some serious kneeling going on there, which is one solution that can help to lead us to EVs. I also want to point out that EVs are here right now in some accessible applications. So you'll see in the corner there's the Ford E-Transit, which is in market today. And is being upfitted for commercial accessible use. And the electric ProMaster from Ram is coming next year too. So again, we're gaining expertise, coming up with solutions that are in market today to ensure that people are not drilling through the floor and going into batteries. There are some other things that I can't really talk about right now that we're working with some other advanced tech partners. And again, this is kind of the long runway here, getting ready for EV. I think that's all I have to talk about. Oh, one more. So I'm talking to you right now from Carmel, Indiana. I'm on the north side of Indianapolis, where we opened up our global headquarters about 3 years ago. And about 2 years ago, we built this innovation lab. So that's the building right there in the front. That is our engineering laboratory where our R&D team is located. And that's the group I work with as we work on these market shaping advanced technologies to enable accessibility around electric vehicles, around autonomous vehicles, finding new ways of sensing that can help what we do, taking IoT, Internet of Things, and figuring out how we can bring value to both personal and consumer waves. That is my last slide. Thank you.
Great, Kevin. We appreciate that information, and it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of stuff. We're at the roundtable part of our discussion right now, which I believe will be myself and Kevin and Philip, also from VMI. So welcome you guys to the, I guess you could say, to the roundtable or to the discussion. Basically, what I'd like to talk about are some some issues that we just heard you talk about, and where is the industry moving on this issue? Philip, you guys, both of y'all currently do conversions for minivans, and that's the way it's been for lots of folks with disabilities. Back when I started driving after my injury, I had a full-size Ford with a big Ricon lift that came down on the side. I guess the question I have is, with electric vehicles, a lot of times the batteries are in the floorboards. So are you still going to be able to modify minivans? In what capacity, or how would that work, especially if you get these minivans that have batteries in the floorboards?
Well, great question, Lee. First, let me say thank you for having us. And Kevin, a pleasure to speak with you on this today. So thank you. I look forward to this. Lee, probably a couple of things that are important for the audience here. As Kevin mentioned, both companies are currently converting hybrid, and the batteries are in the floor. And I think Kevin also pointed out that we're learning quite a bit right now about how to handle the high voltage. We do need to move those batteries to do the conversions under the current situation. When it comes to a fully electric vehicle, we don't have the answers to that at Advantage Mobility at this point. And I know, Kevin, your team is working on some more advanced stuff on a few things. We are as well, but to date, the fully electric minivan is not something yet ready to be put in our hands to tear it apart. Now, on the fuller size units that both Kevin and I build, the ProMasters and Transits, et cetera, we're starting to get some experience there, Lee. But you don't have to move those floors, right?
Yeah, I'll just add to that as I mentioned, we're looking at developing new methods and technologies that can support waves and floor changes with batteries. As you saw on that redone Jeep Willys, we kneeled the heck out of it to get it basically laying on the ground. So there's definitely going to be some changes. There's going to be some new developments and probably a little bit of paradigm shift needing to happen when we have the right body style EVs that truthfully consumers demand and that justify both of our investments to create accessible versions.
Okay, well, that sounds good. One of the things, earlier in the year, President Biden drove that Ford F-150 Lightning, the electric pickup truck. And, after he drove, of course, it was on a closed course because they don't like presidents driving cars. But when he finished, he said, basically, wow, that sucker's fast. And this is coming from a guy who's got a classic Corvette in his garage. And I'm just wondering, I've seen in the past where pickups can be modified, where a person can, have a seat that comes out and lowers, and then there's an arm that comes out of the bed. Is that something possible that that can be done on an electric truck? Do you know or not, or is that something you've seen or heard of?
Yeah, well, I'd say, a couple different things. So for instance, the seats that allow transferees to, use a vehicle, those are leveraging some of the OEM attachments, and we believe we can stay away from batteries with what we do with those today. And again, a lot of this is going to apply to the mobility dealers that are out there. Same thing if you're putting something in the bed of the truck that's there to lift up a scooter or lift up a wheelchair. Our dealer is going to have to get a little bit smarter here. On an F-150 Lightning, for example, you're going to want to stay outboard of the frame rails, rearward of the battery. The thing that we're working to teach our channel is how to work with and around batteries.
Right.
It's going to require some changes in what we were doing today.
Okay. I guess that almost, I'm sorry, go ahead, Philip. Did you?
Sorry, I was just going to add, spot on, Kevin. I think the other thing, Lee, is both of our companies are, doing our best to work with OEMs to actually take mobility into consideration as things move forward, which I think we can all agree in the past wasn't really something they focused on. But as was mentioned earlier, because this is a need product, not a want product, we continue to push the envelope with the OEMs to take considerations for this group of folks.
Good. Well, this almost is, y'all can crank up the same answer to this question too, because I'm looking at, like I said, I drove a van when I was younger. A lot of our members drive vans. I drive a car right now, but it's gas powered. And the real question is, we've got all these crossover vehicles now on the road that the OEMs are pushing out to the market. The Ford Mustang was a sports car back in the day, and now the product they push is a 4-door, crossover vehicle that's almost is too tall to transfer in and out of from a wheelchair. And same with other, small SUVs and those type of vehicles. And I'm just wondering, what do you think your industry, down the road, is there possibility that these type of vehicles can be modified for, people with disabilities and those in wheelchairs possibly getting in and out of them?
I think that if I might take a swing at that, there's really two different segments, Lee, to the different types of vehicles. When you think in terms of a wheelchair user that isn't transferring and either is a driver or a passenger, the WAV or the ProMasters, the different vehicles of that nature, it's all about the height and the ability to access that vehicle within their chair. Where many of the smaller crossovers, the Mustangs of the world, I know you'd mentioned the VW, et cetera, that kind of starts to go back to the other segment of our market, unlike what Kevin and I's companies mainly do is an actual conversion where dealers will do more of the adaption work. And Kevin, maybe you can share more knowledge on that, of course, but there's really two different segments there, Lee. Kevin and I probably aren't going to be running stuff down our lines every day
Okay.
to have a seat. But let me toss that over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit because you started talking about the Mustang Mach-E. I think Ford calls that a crossover of some sorts. And you can even look at like the Tesla Model X or the Model Y. They also call those crossovers. What they really illustrate, though, is the importance of aerodynamics when you want to maximize battery range.
Right.
So that's why you're not seeing something like a Chevy Suburban electric, which is big and square. Will you? Well, yes. I mean, you just look at the Ford F-150, right? That's an electric truck which uses the ICE architecture essentially, or even the coming Silverado EV. Also very size like the market requires for that type of vehicle. So, I think although some of these initial vehicles don't really seem to lend themselves to getting the height that we look for due to conversion on, they're going to come eventually. The market's been very luxury focused, from the last 10 years, truthfully, when Tesla came out of nowhere and exploded. A lot of the entries that are out there today are very expensive and are coming in, quite truthfully, at the high end. So even though a $39,000 F-150 or Silverado EV sounds great, the consumer versions are over $100,000.
Right.
So
Right.
those are just in the stratosphere right now, but it's coming. You see GM talking about Equinox and Blazer. They're doing multiple reveals of vehicles that are coming. And we do believe, talking to our OEM partners and looking at third-party forecasters, that there is going to be a gradual and eventual change to the bodies that lend themselves better for conversion, i.e., full wheelchair usage inside.
Well, that sounds great. I appreciate y'all's insight for this roundtable. Let's flip it back to Heather and we'll start getting some questions from the members who were participants on the webinar. Heather? Oh, before we get to Heather, I forgot there's some resources that you can pull up on your website. Basically, the DOT's talking about the electrification across the country. Also, the charging stations that the Access Board did their hearings on, and that's going to go across the country. And then you've got some websites from the OEMs that you can look at the type of vehicles we've just been talking about that Kevin and Philip modify, coming from Chrysler, Toyota, Ford, and also GM. And then just for kicks, I put the Hummer in there in case anyone wants to look at what a Hummer modification looks like, or electric vehicle Hummer, that is. There you go. Questions and answers with Heather.
Good afternoon again, everyone. This is Heather. So in order to submit a question, please use the Q&A box that you have on your screen. And we do have several questions and answers that have already come in. So I am going to take this down and we'll pull up all of our speakers so that you can see who is answering those questions for you today. Our first question that we have is involving an individual who drives a Chrysler Pacifica converted by Braun, has a side entry van gator, and it has a factory tow package, which is important to the veteran's lifestyle. But they understand that the hybrid version of this same vehicle does not offer that, and is asking as an insider if you know what would be available for those people who might use small trailers or with their minivans or other vehicles. Sometimes folks even use those to transport scooters that might be coming out for modifications without having to go to a pickup truck type conversion.
I'm going to plead a little bit of ignorance here. I don't know the specifics around the Pacifica side entry conversions and towing packages. I do know that our Chevrolet Traverse, which is also a side entry, non-minivan crossover, that does have a tow package available. Again, I'm not sure what's driving, whether that's even available or not today. I can certainly find out.
Yeah, Philip?
I might, yeah, I might be able to help a little. Sorry, the air conditioning turned on, so I muted myself.
Help me out.
So one of the things about minivans that I've talked to end customers about on a frequent basis over the last 5 years, you know, they come with that 2-inch receiver, and why don't we leave that on there, and why can't they tow with it? And while I won't speak for Braun directly, I know that VMI does not actually certify any of our conversions for towing capacity. That being said, we do let them be sure that they know whatever the weight carrying capacity of that, for example, to put a scooter in the hitch or a bike rack or something like that, that is maintained. And the reason that we choose not to certify our vehicles for actual tow capacity is, unlike some of the SUVs or trucks, they have a solid frame. And that solid frame is what determines a lot of that tow capacity. In a unibody construction, the conversion process that most companies make actually puts cuts into that unibody, and you'd have to go through a different process to certify towing, just like we do for our crash testing. Hopefully that's helpful to you too, Kevin.
All right, well, thank you for that answer. Another question we had was about the fully electric VW bus that's coming, arriving in the US in 2024. And any questions about whether that's been looked at for possible modification?
Well, I know that was just shown at one of the European upfitter shows. To my knowledge, nobody in Europe is currently planning on doing a upfitter conversion on it. Certainly something that I would imagine both us and VMI will be looking at as the long wheelbase comes to fruition here for the US. At the same time, although I guess it sounds good because it's not a $106,000 vehicle, it's very likely to be, you know, starting in the 60s, and probably when you get to something with a power sliding door, probably quite a bit north of that too. But again, it might be a way to get out in front of things, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing that come to the US.
Great. Another question is questions about, are there weight capacities? Currently one big chair and an individual with gear. There's a question about, does that put hybrids at capacity? Any concerns with weight issues and hybrid vehicles?
Philip, you want to talk to me, please?
Yeah, no, that's okay. Sorry, I'm a car guy, so these things are kind of a hobby for me, right? So GVWR is a really big consideration here, right? The gross vehicle weight rating. And hybrids are by nature a heavier vehicle than a standard gas vehicle. So you do lose some capacity regardless of who's doing the conversion. But then second to that, as was mentioned earlier, even not just with the Teslas of the world, but even with the Stellantis product, the Honda product, and the Toyota product, there's a lot more high-end versions out there. And every option that you add to a vehicle as the OEM adds weight. The challenge for the converters is, of course, we also add quite a bit of weight to make sure that they're structurally sound and pass the appropriate FMVSS crash tests to keep our customers safe. It does cause an issue with reducing the number of passengers. I think that the unknown, and Kevin, you probably know more about this than I do, if I'm honest, the unknown on the full electric will become, how heavy does that become when it's that much more battery? And does that really limit us on the carrying capacity, Kevin?
Well, I mean, you can look at some of the commercial entries right now, the Ford E-Transit specifically. You know, the manufacturers need to be competitive and, you know, address the needs of customers, whether consumer or commercial. But the vehicles do get heavier. A battery pack is easily 1,000 pounds these days, depending upon how many kilowatt hours it is. But at the same time, the OEM manufacturers are building in, you know, passenger and cargo capacity like they have today on ICE vehicles. You're just going to be starting from a heavier vehicle point, essentially. So EVs are not going to cause issues any more than we're dealing with today with staying under GVWRs.
Great. Another question about hybrids is about the Toyota Sienna hybrid and asking if that's available with an in-floor ramp.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's the primary conversion I know for VMI, and I believe that Kevin, you also do an in-floor conversion on that, if I recall.
Yeah, we did lead with the fold out, but there is an in-floor also now.
Great. Do we have any idea how many accessible EVs there are, and what would come the future if EVs, electric vehicles, become the only source, which, you know, we all know it's going to be a lead up, but that's where we appear to be headed. Are there concerns that about what that might mean for folks who need adaptations right now to their vehicles to be able to use them?
Well, I would say quite truthfully, we've had some discussions with OEMs, and adaptation and hand controls are one of the things that everybody's looking at. In some ways, EVs and the technology that comes with them could make things easier. And I guess I'm talking specifically about things like drive-by-wire, where I'm sure at someday in the future you'll be able to plug these things in, and they'll be a lot easier to do. At the same time, when you look at some of the self-driving technologies, so let's just look at some of the ones that are on the market today. GM Super Cruise, for example, which does allow hands-off. That poses some challenges on what happens to that when you have different hand controls or driving controls based on dexterity and disability. So some good things probably happening with advanced tech, and some challenges that quite truthfully everybody's talking about, and we're looking at it here again, so we can make take advantage of this technology for anybody.
I think it's possible, Heather, that one of the missed challenges, not from the developer perspective, but actually from the end user perspective, as we work through how to adapt those vehicles, as pointed out earlier, the cost of them just at the base is very high right now. And then when you think about all of the add-ons that need to be done and all the upfitting that would need to be done to them, we really start to push an envelope that takes a need-based product to kind of an unacceptable level in today's current market. But of course, our hope is over the course of time, working with the OEMs, we find a way to mitigate some of that cost. So many of our folks are relying upon the legislation that was talked about earlier in this discussion, and how frequently they'll be able to purchase a vehicle. And as we all know, $20,000 doesn't buy a used vehicle today, much less a base model $70,000 all electric. So we have to remember that along with what's happening in technology, the cost associated is maybe one of the largest challenges.
Well, and that is a good point. I did look up the current figure from VA. So today, if you're able to use an auto grant, it's at $22,355 is the reimbursement you would receive to buy the vehicle if you have an auto grant available to you at this time. Another question about batteries, and that's whether batteries have enough power to lift seats, wheelchairs in the trucks, and have enough power to run the truck. This person drives a Chevy 1500 adapted through ATC conversions.
Well, I mean, everybody uses, low voltage today, and, quite truthfully, going to a 48 volt or taking some advantage of that much bigger capacity could drive some very interesting and beneficial developments around lifts of the type you're talking to. So there's probably some more upside there, but it's going to require people to change and evolve and, find new solutions that are better, but a little bit different.
Great. Another question that we had related to was to you, Kevin, and asked if you could elaborate at all about the technologies that are in the works, and that you mentioned you were working with some universities. So anything else you could tell us about what's on the horizon?
I think I alluded to a lot of them there. So like I said, that extra thin ramp we developed, which is a little less than 2 inches in thickness, was specifically done for an electric vehicle. Some of the other things that are in market right now are adhesive floors. So we do that in commercial paratransit, non-emergency medical transport, those kind of things. And what that allows you to do is to put the floor surface down and glue it with structural adhesive. So now upfitters will no longer be drilling through the floor where the batteries are. And now they have the ability to reconfigure, seating, lifts, wheelchair securement devices, whatever it is. So there's something else we already have in the market to address that type of item. I don't know if there's anything else I can specifically talk to. I guess working with Purdue, there were some interesting things we did on that DOT entry. There's a lot of things out there you can find that Purdue published. But we had a prototype wheelchair docking system that could modify height to accommodate a variety of chairs. We had a camera system on that. So in this unowned vehicle, the wheelchair user could see on a big screen inside the vehicle where they were in relationship to the dock and aid in docking. We had voice activation in that vehicle. So you could use it for ramp deployment, for turning lights on and off. We had multiple horn sounds on it. So that was for those who might be blind or sight disabled, that it has different tones for front and rear. We had a sonar type device that was monitoring the ramp deployment area so that if there was something there, the ramp would not deploy. So these are all kind of, things that were done with Purdue and other partners here to kind of show, here's the kind of things that can be done, the what ifs. Some of those, like I said, we already are taking to market, i.e. the floor, which also was in that Purdue vehicle, or the ramp. And there's other things, maybe. I think Purdue is setting up a center to work on these type of projects with the winnings. So it's projects like that, and the results of it can continue to drive some of these developments and innovations that are going to be required as we all find ourselves in different modes of transportation.
So a question I know we've heard before is, are there any safety concerns with EV vehicles versus hybrid gas-powered vehicles in terms of fires? What happens if there's a collision? And a concern that egress from EVs might be limited. Anything you can talk about the safety aspect and as that relates to the adaptations or modifications?
Well, as Philip and I know, in our conversion today, remember, we're dealing with these big tanks full of gasoline. Which just thinking of that by itself, that's really flammable, but nobody was really too concerned because there's a lot of regulation, a lot of design standards that keep that from being a problem. Same way with electric vehicles. You have very well-designed and tightly controlled systems and structures that help to eliminate that to almost zero possibility. You also have advancements in batteries that are coming. So things like lithium iron phosphate, which is a different type of battery, which is the dominant one in China right now. It doesn't quite have as high of an energy density, but it does solve the issues of, when exposed, being flammable. So there are things like that are happening. Solid state batteries, right? As someone finally cracks the code on that, there's lots of people reaching for that. More developments that are gonna, in many ways, just eliminate some of the early concerns that people had.
I think something else that's probably really important to the users of our products and the public in general is the OEMs are spending hundreds of millions of dollars investigating, learning, and bringing this technology to market.
Billion.
And billion, there you go. But as manufacturers, the one thing that we aren't doing as an industry is trying to redesign their batteries for them, right? We might move them. We might connect to them. But what we're not doing is cutting their batteries apart and doing something different. And the reason that I point that out is I've fielded a number of phone calls from end users who are, concerned about such things and how did we rebuild a battery. I just want to make it clear to everyone that none of us are rebuilding those batteries. We trust our OEM partners and the standards that they must meet to keep everybody safe, and then we respect that with regard to the battery integrity.
You know, I've thought about this too, Philip, and joke that who knows, maybe in 50 years from now, much like you can buy, you know, AAA batteries and put them in your remote, many different brands,
Yeah.
maybe that'll happen someday, maybe not. Maybe battery technology will be the differentiator that automotive OEM uses to entice customers. But yeah, I'd echo what Philip says right now. I mean, that's like saying, are you going to take a couple cylinders out of an engine for your wave? And it's like, no, we're not going to do that. That is, it's not really technically feasible or financially justifiable at all.
For sure.
Can you talk a little bit about thoughts into the charging of the vehicles? So having to plug them in, unplug them at public charging stations, as Lee mentioned, there's a lot of federal money going into setting up a charging infrastructure. I know we've weighed in on the need for it to be accessible, but what have you seen from your end in terms of how do you charge these vehicles?
Well, the good news is I actually own an EV. We took the plunge early this year, and that has been immensely helpful to make me even smarter on the area I'm working in. The good news is for those who are driving waves and have a garage or a driveway with access to power, it eliminates one of the difficulties of trying to get, you know, to a fuel station and get assistance if required. You can have your vehicle always charge for you when you're leaving at home. Level 2 chargers, you know, 240 volts, again, require some dexterity, but they're quite easy to operate. I will tell you that DC public fast chargers are horrific. My wife, who is able-bodied, has trouble using them. And absolutely, we need improvements in the infrastructure and the use case and addressing the accessibility standards, because that definitely needs to be looked at. I know our friends at the US Access Board are working diligently on that. I think you even had Randall talk to it here at one of your earlier seminars. So again, there's some benefits now that if you're not driving 500 miles, if you're just using one full battery, your vehicle's always charged with a relatively very easy to use level 2 charger. But public DC fast charging is hard.
I think also when you consider exactly what you just said about the infrastructure and how difficult it can be out in public, at this time, I think there's a lot more focus on the gas hybrid combination versus the plug-in hybrid combination. For our customers currently, that's frankly a more accessible way for them to utilize. They already have challenges with getting fuel sometimes at the fuel station, depending on their dexterity challenges, right? Adding the plug-in hybrid to it at the moment might add that complexity. And so thus the gas hybrid is a great option right now as this whole technology improves and the infrastructure gets built.
We have another question about concerns about EVs operating in colder climates. Someone owns one of the Toyota Sienna hybrids and says it does not heat very well in below freezing temps. Any comments about EVs and temperature?
Batteries like moderate temperatures. They don't like excessive heat. They don't like excessive cold. You know, amazingly enough, virtually every EV out there has a temperature controlled battery. So you still have radiators in EVs and you still have coolant. My wife's little car actually has 3 coolant reservoirs under the hood still, because they're there specifically for the battery. So that coolant is flowing through the battery, touching, you know, every cell and keeping it optimally temperature controlled. Yeah, snow temperatures are going to impact range. No doubt about it. Ask anyone who has an EV and they'll note that you do see reduced range. Is it going to cut it in half? No. It depends. Maybe you'll see, you know, up to a 20% reduction. Those who are in cold, snowy climates, you're going to see less. You know, in theory, we probably see the same reduction in our ICE vehicles to some degree. But we're not really noticing it because you've got a rather large tank. And as Philip mentioned, in many cases, you have a 400-mile range. You probably wouldn't even notice if you lost 10% and had 360 miles. Obviously, that's a little more
Right.
concerning on batteries that may not have that. I will note that, there are EVs in the market today that have over 400 miles of range, which is just phenomenal. Some of the new entries from Lucid do that, and even some of the larger battery Teslas. So it's getting better, it's getting faster, it's getting farther. I think any manufacturer that comes out with that 200-mile, 225-mile range today, they're just cutting their own throat, because there are so many other entries out there that get 300 or more. So again, it's going to get better. I totally understand the psychological aspect of knowing you're limited in range, and a lot of that is because what happens if you run out? At least gas, you're not worried when you get down to 1/8 of a tank, because there's a gas station everywhere. You'll just go get gas. Eventually, as that infrastructure builds up, you're going to feel the same way about an EV vehicle. You're going to be able to pull in and do a fast charge and gain 100 miles of range in 8 minutes and be on your way. So it's coming, it's getting better. We're doing an evolution here, not an overnight change.
Well, we are coming up to the end of our session. We've had so many questions for this webinar that we simply didn't have time to get to all of them. And so we will follow up with providing some additional responses to Q&A when we make the webinar available. But kind of a final closing question, this hits a few of them, is what are manufacturers looking at doing at designing and building wheelchair accessible vehicles that don't need conversions? And what is already being done to work with companies like Tesla and people that are making electric vehicles now to try to address these issues?
Well, speaking for ourselves, we are talking to OEMs and on this very topic. How can they improve what they do to make it better for everybody? Companies like Toyota and General Motors are just grabbing onto this big time. They have people specifically working on these areas right now. When it comes to away from the OEM, which I think this question was alluding to, that's a little challenging because you need to have a vehicle that has enough height. They exist today. In most cases, we're talking a full-size van. There are some nice opportunities in Europe right now. They do have a lot of consumer versions of small and mid-sized vans. Unfortunately, some of the OEMs just announced they're canceling them in the US. So vehicles like the Transit Connect, vehicles like the Ram ProMaster City might very well lend themselves to doing accessibility with minimal changes or ramp install. So we're kind of limited by what the mass market is looking for and what OEMs are investing billions of dollars for. There's going to be some opportunities there and some solutions, but it's not going to be everything.
I think there's one other thing that we always have to keep in mind, and I would echo everything you just said, Kevin, and maybe toss this in. We're talking with GM and Toyota and others, and they are asking for input, as was brought up earlier, to try and find a way to better serve this community and these users. But we need to keep in mind that the OEMs, when they look at their models, they're looking at hundreds of thousands of units in order for them to choose to produce something if it's going to have, a long-term run, 5-7 years on a platform. And our market isn't that big. So our focused efforts so far have been, what can they do to build a product that will not only meet the normal end consumer and the mobility end consumer so that it benefits both sides and encourages them to invest in it?
Well, thank you, Kevin and Philip and Lee for leading this webinar. We did work with the NMEDA, the National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association, in securing Kevin and Philip today. And they are the nonprofit organization that represents the automobile industry, and Ronability and VMI are their members. And certainly you can contact Namita with any questions about accessible vehicles, vehicle modifications, or adaptive driving technology. I know many of you had questions about accessing the VA's automobile allowance, accessing adaptions through VA, including an installation of charging at home. I would encourage you to contact your PVA National Service Officer. If you don't know who that individual is, you can go to pva.org and find a service officer. They can assist you at no charge in looking at those benefits. As I said, we will also provide, because we did get so many questions today, we will provide some additional responses moving forward when we put out the webinar, just to make sure that folks have that information. This has been our second webinar touching on EVs, AV EVs, and now on EVs. So this is going to be something that we continue to provide you with information on. And hopefully, if we are able to get the HR 3304 legislation that would give the additional auto grant passed, like I said, that's not law right now, but if we're able to get that passed, certainly we'll be having more information on that as well. So we want to thank you today for taking the time to join us on the webinar, and it will be recorded and available on PVA's website and also sent to all who RSVP'd. Thank you again, Kevin and Philip, for your time today. We really appreciated it. Thank you. This concludes our webinar.
Thank you.